Marcus Reed walked through the lower cargo bay of the massive ship called Harmony and heard strange sounds coming from behind a stack of metal boxes. He moved closer and saw something that made him stop in surprise. A creature sat in the corner, eating scraps of food from the floor like it had not eaten in days. The thing looked like someone had mixed different animals together and made a mistake. It had patches of brown and gray fur that looked dirty and torn. One eye was blue and the other was green, and they did not match at all. Its legs were different sizes, so it walked with a bad limp. The creature had a long tail that dragged on the ground and ears that pointed in different directions. Marcus had been working on this ship for 6 months as a scientist who studied alien life forms. He had never seen anything like this creature before. As he watched it eat the scraps, a group of tall blue aliens called Valtharians walked into the cargo bay. They saw the creature and started laughing in a mean way. The leader of the group was a tall female with perfect blue skin and silver hair. She kicked the creature away from the food scraps and it fell over with a sad whimper. The other Valtharians laughed even louder, and one of them threw an empty container at the creature. It hit the animal on the head, but the creature just moved away without fighting back. Marcus felt angry watching this happen. He stepped forward and said to the Valtharians that they should not hurt the creature. The leader turned to look at Marcus with cold silver eyes. She told him that the thing was just a mongrel they found on a broken ship floating in space. She said it was ugly and worthless and only good for cleaning up messes. The Valtharian explained that their race valued perfection and beauty above all things. They believed that ugly creatures like this one were mistakes of nature and deserved no respect or kindness. She said humans were almost as ugly as the creature, but at least humans could be useful for simple work. After the Valtharians left, Marcus stayed in the cargo bay with the creature. He pulled out some real food from his lunch pack and offered it to the animal. The creature looked at him with those mismatched eyes for a long time, like it was trying to decide if Marcus could be trusted. Then it slowly moved forward and took the food from his hand very gently. Marcus noticed that the creature was much more careful and thoughtful than he expected. When it ate the food, it did not grab or fight for more. Instead, it ate slowly and kept looking at Marcus like it was saying thank you. The scientist decided to come back every day to bring food and check on the creature. Over the next few weeks, Marcus learned more about how the Valtharians treated the creature they called the mongrel. They made it clean the dirty parts of the ship that no one else wanted to touch. They gave it very little food and no place to sleep except the cold cargo bay floor. When it made any sound, they would hit it or throw things at it, but Marcus saw things the Valtharians did not see. The creature understood when people talked, even in different alien languages. When Marcus spoke to it, the creature would tilt its head and listen carefully. Sometimes it would even try to make sounds back like it was trying to talk. The creature was also very smart about solving problems. Marcus watched it figure out how to open containers that were supposed to be locked. It could move through the ship without making noise and always seemed to know when someone was coming before they appeared. The creature avoided the Valtharians perfectly, like it could sense where they were at all times. Marcus started calling the creature Patch because of its patchy fur. Every day he would visit Patch and bring food and water. He would also talk to Patch about his work and his life back on Earth. Patch would listen to every word and sometimes make soft sounds like it was responding to what Marcus said. One day, Marcus brought some testing equipment to scan Patch and see what kind of alien it might be. When he turned on the scanner, something very strange happened. The device started showing readings that made no sense. According to the scanner, Patch had DNA from many different species, all mixed together in ways that should be impossible. Marcus ran the scan 3 more times, but got the same impossible results each time. The DNA showed pieces from reptiles and mammals and even some patterns that the computer could not identify at all. It was like someone had taken genetic material from dozens of different creatures and somehow made them work together in one body. When Marcus tried to tell other scientists on the ship about what he found, they did not believe him. They said his equipment must be broken because no creature could have DNA like that. The Valtharians laughed when they heard about it and said Marcus was wasting time studying garbage, but Marcus knew his equipment worked fine. He had tested it on many other creatures and it always gave correct readings. There was something very special about Patch that no one else could see. The creature was not just some random animal they found floating in space. Someone or something had made Patch. For a specific purpose, Marcus began to spend more time with Patch, and noticed that the creature watched everything that happened on the ship. It paid attention to the computers and the control systems like it was learning how everything worked. Sometimes Marcus caught Patch staring at the walls in places where important ship systems were hidden behind metal panels. The creature also seemed to sense danger before anyone else did. When there were problems with the ship systems, Patch would become nervous and restless hours before the alarms went off. When other ships approached, Patch would position itself near emergency exits like it was ready to run or fight. Marcus realized that Patch was not just intelligent but possibly more aware of what was happening around them than any of the advanced aliens on the ship. The creature that everyone called ugly and worthless might actually be the most important being on the entire vessel, but Marcus had no idea just how important Patch really was or what terrible danger was heading their way through the darkness of space. Marcus spent every free moment studying the strange readings from Patch. He used different machines and ran secret tests when the Valtharians were not watching. Each test showed the same impossible results. Patch had genetic material that came from species across the galaxy mixed together in perfect harmony. The most shocking discovery came when Marcus found patterns in the DNA that did not match any known life form in the ship computer. These unknown sequences were not random mistakes, but carefully designed genetic code that served specific purposes. Someone with incredible knowledge had built Patch like an engineer builds a machine, but using living tissue instead of metal and circuits. Marcus found genetic markers that showed Patch could process different types of radiation that would kill most creatures. Other sequences suggested the ability to interface with electronic systems without any visible connection. There were even patterns that looked like they were designed for rapid healing and adaptation to hostile environments while Marcus worked. On his secret research, the ship received an emergency signal from a research station called Outpost 7. The message was broken and full of static, but the words that came through were terrifying. The people at the station were screaming about something that was eating everything and growing bigger. Then the signal cut off completely. Captain Torres of the Harmony called a meeting of all senior staff to discuss the situation, the Valtharian. Commander Lyra took control of the meeting as she always did. She explained that Outpost 7 had been conducting archaeological research on ruins from an ancient alien civilization. The station had valuable research data and possibly alien technology that could be claimed. Marcus tried to suggest that they should be careful and maybe call for backup before investigating. Commander Lyra looked at him with disgust and said that humans always showed fear when there was opportunity for profit. She said the Valtharians would handle any danger while the humans stayed safe on the ship doing simple support work. The Harmony changed course toward Outpost 7, which was located at the edge of known space where few ships ever traveled. During the 3-day journey, Marcus noticed that Patch was acting very strangely. The creature seemed nervous and kept trying to get Marcus' attention by making urgent sounds and gestures. Patch would run to different parts of the ship and then come back to Marcus like it was trying to show him something important. The creature drew pictures in the dust on the cargo bay floor, but Marcus could not understand what they meant. The drawings looked like circles with smaller circles inside them and lines connecting different shapes. On the 2nd day of the journey, something incredible happened. Marcus was working late in his small laboratory when all the lights went out. Emergency power came on a few seconds later, but during those few seconds of darkness, Marcus saw a strange blue glow coming from the cargo bay. He rushed down to find Patch sitting next to one of the main computer terminals. The creature was not touching the terminal, but somehow information was flowing across the screen faster than any human or Valtharian could read. When Patch saw Marcus, the glow faded and the computer screen went back to normal. Marcus checked the computer logs and discovered that someone had accessed classified information about their destination and the research being done at Outpost 7. The access codes used were not assigned to any crew member, and the system showed no record of anyone being logged in at that time. The next day, Marcus confronted Patch about what he had seen. He spoke quietly to the creature and asked if it could somehow connect to computer systems. Patch looked around to make sure no one else was watching, then slowly nodded its mismatched head. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized what this meant. Patch was not just an intelligent animal, but some kind of biological computer that could interface with electronic systems. No wonder the creature always seemed to know what was happening around the ship. It had been monitoring all communications and data flows. Through careful questioning, Marcus learned that Patch had discovered disturbing information about Outpost 7. The research station had been digging up ruins from a civilization that called themselves the Architects. These ancient beings had disappeared millions of years ago, but their technology was far advanced beyond anything known to current galactic civilizations. Patch showed Marcus new drawings that were much more detailed than before. The creature drew pictures of the Architects as tall beings with multiple arms who built great cities and powerful machines. But the drawings also showed something else. Dark shapes that moved like liquid and consumed everything they touched. The station research team had found a sealed chamber deep in the Architect ruins. When they opened the chamber, they released something that had been locked away for millions of years. The final message from the station mentioned that their equipment was being absorbed and transformed into something alien and hostile. Marcus tried to warn Commander Lara about what Patch had discovered, but she refused to listen. She said that a human scientist getting information from an ugly animal was ridiculous. The Valtharians had much better technology and intelligence than any primitive creature could provide, but Marcus noticed that some of the other crew members was starting to pay attention to Patch. The creature had begun predicting small problems with ship systems hours before they happened. When Patch became restless near certain areas, maintenance teams would find issues that needed immediate repair. The Harmony got closer to Outpost 7. Patch became more and more agitated. The creature would not eat and kept making distress sounds that everyone on the ship could hear. It drew frantic pictures showing the dark shapes spreading outward from the research station like an infection. On the final day before arrival, Marcus discovered that Patch had been accessing star charts and navigation data. The creature had calculated the speed and direction of movement from the station and determined that whatever was released was already spreading through space faster than any known technology could track. Marcus realized that Patch was not just trying to warn them about danger at the research station. The creature was trying to tell them that something far worse was already on its way toward them. The mismatched eyes that everyone mocked for being ugly were actually watching for threats that their advanced sensors could not detect. When Marcus looked at Patch, he no longer saw an ugly mongrel that deserved pity. He saw a guardian that had been trying to protect them from the very beginning, but he also saw fear in those strange eyes. For the first time since finding Patch in the cargo bay, Marcus understood that the creature was afraid of something so terrible that even its incredible abilities might not be enough to stop it. The Harmony arrived at Outpost 7 to find a scene that defied explanation. The research station hung in space like a twisted sculpture made of metal and something that looked like living tissue. Parts of the station appeared to be breathing and pulsing with dark veins running through the hull. Commander Lyra stared at the main screen, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, she looked uncertain. The station was 3 times larger than it should have been and growing bigger. As they watched, strange pods were breaking away from the main structure and floating through space like seeds, looking for new ground to grow in. The science officer reported that their scanners could not get clear readings from the station. The metal and technology were mixed with organic matter in ways that made no sense. Life signs showed thousands of creatures moving inside the station, but the patterns were all wrong. Everything seemed connected like parts of one massive organism. Marcus looked at Patch and saw that the creature was no longer afraid. Instead, Patch was studying the station with intense focus like a soldier examining an enemy position. The creatures' mismatched eyes were tracking the movement of the floating pods with perfect precision. Captain Torres ordered a probe to be sent to the station for a closer look. As soon as the small probe got within a kilometer of the station, something incredible happened. Tendrils of the dark organic matter reached out through space and grabbed the probe. Within seconds, the probe was pulled into the station and disappeared. Few minutes later, the probe emerged from the other side of the station, but it looked completely different. The metal hull was covered with the same pulsing organic matter they had seen on the station. The probe's instruments were still working, but now they were transmitting data that showed the station's true nature. The research team had found a sealed vault in the architect ruins that contained something called the Devourers. These were biological weapons created by an ancient enemy of the architects designed to consume all organic matter and convert it into more of themselves. The Devourers could adapt to any environment and absorb any technology they encountered. Commander, Lyra ordered the modified probe to be destroyed before it could get close to their ship. The weapons hit the probe and it exploded, but instead of debris, the explosion released hundreds of small dark organisms that immediately began moving toward the Harmony. Marcus watched as Patch suddenly stood up and began making sounds he had never heard before. The creature's body started to change in ways that seemed impossible. The patchy fur fell away to reveal skin that shifted color and texture. The mismatched eyes began to glow with the same blue light Marcus had seen in the laboratory. The first wave of Devour organisms reached the Harmony and began eating through the hull like acid. Emergency alarms started blaring as the ship's systems detected multiple hull breaches. The crew ran to emergency stations, but their weapons had no effect on the creatures that seemed to absorb energy and grow stronger. Patch moved through the ship faster than Marcus had ever seen any creature move. The awkward limp was gone, and instead Patch flowed like liquid through corridors and maintenance shafts. Everywhere the creature went, the Devour organisms stopped their attack and pulled back like they recognized something dangerous. Marcus followed Patch to the main cargo bay where the creature had positioned itself near the largest hull breach. As more Devour organisms poured through the hole, Patch opened its mouth and released a sound that was part roar and part electronic signal. The sound made every piece of technology on the ship vibrate and hum. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and dramatic. The organisms that had been eating through the ship's hull suddenly stopped moving and began to dissolve into gray dust. The ones trying to enter through other breaches retreated back into space like they were running from something they feared. Commander, Lyra and her team arrived in the cargo bay just in time to see Patch transform completely. The creature's body expanded and reshaped itself, revealing hidden structures that looked like both biological organs and mechanical components. Armor plating emerged from under the skin, and weapon systems extended from what had looked like normal limbs. For the first time since Marcus had known her, Commander Lyra was speechless. The ugly mongrel that her people had kicked and abused was revealing itself to be a war machine beyond anything in their technology. Patch turned to look at the Valtharians with eyes that now blazed with ancient intelligence and power. Through the ship's communication system, Patch spoke in a voice that combined multiple languages and electronic signals. The creature explained that it was a guardian created by the architects as their final defense against the Devourers. When the architects realized they could not destroy the Devourers, they created guardians to contain them and prevent their spread. Told them that the Devourers had been sealed away for millions of years, but the research team at Outpost 7 had broken the containment. Now the Devourers were free and spreading through space in ships grown from consumed matter. They would continue to expand until they had consumed all life in the galaxy unless they were stopped. The Guardian explained that its kind had been programmed with a crucial limitation. They would only activate their full power for beings who showed genuine compassion and respect for all life regardless of appearance or origin. The architects believed that only such beings could be trusted with the power to destroy the Devourers without becoming corrupted. Marcus realized why Patch had allowed itself to be mistreated for so long. The creature had been testing the crew to see who among them was worthy of its protection. Only Marcus had shown kindness to the ugly animal that everyone else ignored and abused. Commander Lyra demanded to know why Patch had not revealed its true nature earlier. The Guardian replied that the Valtharians had failed the test through their treatment of what they saw as an inferior being. A species that judged worth by appearance and treated others with cruelty could not be trusted with the power to reshape life itself. Through the main screen they could see more pods breaking away from the station and heading toward other parts of the galaxy. Each pod contained enough devourers to consume an entire planet within days. The infection was spreading and would soon be beyond any hope of containment. Patch turned to Marcus and asked him to make a choice. The Guardian could save the ship and its crew, but doing so would require Marcus to serve as the connection between the Guardian and the people Patch would protect. The creature needed someone who understood both compassion and the value of life to guide its decisions about who deserved salvation. Marcus looked at Commander Lyra and saw fear in her eyes for the first time. The proud Valtharian who had mocked humans and abused Patch now needed the help of both the ugly mongrel and the inferior human she had dismissed. The irony was not lost on anyone in the cargo bay. As more devourer ships appeared on their sensors, Marcus made his decision. He placed his hand on Patch's transformed body and felt a connection form between his mind and the Guardian's ancient intelligence. Together they would face an enemy that had already destroyed one great civilization and now threatened to consume everything else in the galaxy. The moment Marcus touched Patch, he felt his mind connect with something vast and ancient. Images flowed through his consciousness, showing him the true history of the architects and their final war against the devourers. He saw great cities consumed. In hours, and entire star systems going dark as the infection spread across the galaxy. The architects had been builders and creators who valued all life. When they encountered the devourers, they tried diplomacy first, then defensive measures. Nothing worked because the devourers existed only to consume and grow. They could not be reasoned with or contained by normal means. In desperation, the architects created the Guardians as living weapons that combined the best of biological adaptation with advanced technology. But they programmed a critical safeguard into every Guardian. The weapons would only activate for those who demonstrated the same respect for life that the architects valued. Patch showed Marcus how the Guardian had been testing everyone on the ship from the moment it arrived. Every act of kindness or cruelty was recorded and analyzed. The creature had the power to save them all along, but waited to see who among them deserved that salvation. Through their mental connection, Marcus felt Patch begin to change the ship itself. The Guardian's body produced microscopic organisms that spread through the Harmony systems and began rebuilding everything from the inside out. The ship's hull became stronger and more flexible. Weapon systems that had never existed began forming throughout the vessel. Commander Lyra watched in amazement as her perfect Valtharian technology was transformed by something that looked like organic infection but worked better than anything her people had ever built. The ship's computers became faster and more intuitive. The engines produced more power while using less fuel. The first test of the upgraded systems came when a massive devourer ship appeared near their position. The enemy vessel was clearly grown rather than built, with a hull that pulsed like a living heart. Weapon ports opened along its surface like hungry mouths ready to consume anything they encountered. Patch interfaced directly with the Harmony's new systems and fired weapons that seemed to be made of pure energy guided by biological intelligence. The beam struck the devourer ship, and instead of exploding it began to change back into the original matter it had consumed. Within minutes, the massive enemy vessel had dissolved, completely leaving only harmless space dust, but Marcus could feel through their connection that Patch was troubled. The Guardian explained that this was only one ship out of thousands that were already spreading through the galaxy. The devourers reproduced exponentially, and every planet they consumed made them stronger and more numerous. The real challenge came when Marcus learned that Patch needed to make a terrible choice. The Guardian could save the current crew, but protecting them would limit its ability to fight the larger infection. or Patch could sacrifice the people on the Harmony to pursue and destroy the main Devourer fleet before it reached populated systems. Marcus felt the weight of every life in the galaxy pressing down on him. Through Patch he could sense the Devourers approaching worlds full of innocent people who had no idea what was coming. But he also felt responsible for the crew members around him, including the Valtharians who had treated Patch badly but did not deserve to die. Commander Lyra seemed to understand the situation without being told. She approached Marcus and Patch with an expression he had never seen on her face before. The proud Valtharian leader looked humble and uncertain as she spoke. She told Marcus that her people had been wrong about many things, including the value of beings they considered inferior. She said that if saving the galaxy required sacrificing their ship, then that was what should happen. The needs of billions outweighed the lives of the few hundred crew members on the Harmony, but Marcus had a different idea. Through his connection with Patch, he suggested that the Guardian could absorb the entire crew into its protective matrix during the coming battle. The people would be safe inside Patch's transformed body while the Guardian fought the Devourers. Using the ship's mass to increase its own power and capabilities, Patch considered this option carefully. The Guardian explained that absorbing so many people would be permanent. They would become part of its living system and could never return to their original forms. Some crew members might not survive the process, and those who did would be forever changed. Marcus presented the choice to the crew through the ship's communication system. He explained exactly what Patch was offering and what it would cost. Every person on the ship would have to decide whether to trust their lives to the creature they had ignored and mistreated. The response surprised everyone, including Marcus. One by one, crew members from every species came forward to volunteer for the absorption process. Even Valtharians who had mocked Patch now acknowledged that the Guardian was their only hope for survival and possibly their chance to help save the galaxy. The transformation began in the main cargo bay, where Patch had been living all along. The Guardian's body expanded to fill the entire space and then continued growing throughout the ship. Organic passages formed connecting every section of the vessel. The boundary between technology and biology disappeared completely. Marcus was the first to enter the absorption matrix and found himself in a space that existed somewhere. Between his own consciousness and Patch's ancient memories, he could still think and feel as an individual, but he was also part of something much larger and more powerful than himself. One by one, the other crew members joined them in the living ship that Patch had become. Commander Lyra was among the last to enter, and Marcus felt her amazement as she experienced true unity with other beings for the first time in her life. The Valtharian obsession with individual perfection dissolved in the face of collective purpose. Through sensors that were now part of his extended awareness, Marcus could see the main Devourer fleet approaching a populated star system. Hundreds of enemy ships moved like a dark cloud across space, consuming everything in their path. Planets that had supported life for millions of years were being stripped bare in hours. Patch gathered energy from across the electromagnetic spectrum and prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The Guardian's body reconfigured itself into a form designed for maximum combat effectiveness while maintaining the consciousness and memories of everyone it protected. Marcus felt the collective will of the crew joining with Patch's ancient purpose. Together they would face an enemy that had destroyed the greatest civilization in galactic history. But this time the Devourers would face something they had never encountered before. A Guardian awakened not by duty alone but by love and sacrifice, freely given by those it fought to protect. The living ship that Patch had become moved through space faster than any vessel in recorded history. Marcus felt himself as part of something magnificent and terrible as they approached the Devourer fleet that was consuming the Kepler system. 3 planets had already been stripped bare, and the enemy was beginning to feed on the system's star itself. Through Patch's enhanced senses, Marcus could perceive the true scope of the threat. The Devourers had grown beyond their original programming, and were now capable of consuming energy directly from stellar cores. If they finished draining this star, they would have enough power to spread to a dozen systems simultaneously. The first engagement happened at the edge of the Kepler system, where scout ships from the Devourer fleet detected Patch's approach. These smaller vessels rushed forward like antibodies responding to an infection. But when they tried to consume the Guardian, they discovered something that shocked their collective intelligence. Patch's hull was composed of the same base technology the architects had used to create the Devourers, but refined and perfected over millions of years. When the enemy ships tried to absorb Patch's matter, they instead found themselves being converted back to their original components and integrated into the Guardian's growing mass. Marcus felt Commander Lyra's consciousness merge more fully with his own as they witnessed the impossible sight of Devourer ships being turned into raw material to make Patch stronger. The Valtharian leader's thoughts carried a mixture of awe and regret as she finally understood what her people had been too proud to recognize. The main Devourer fleet responded to the loss of their scouts by launching a coordinated attack with over 200 vessels. They surrounded Patch from every direction and began firing weapons that could disintegrate normal matter at the molecular level. But the Guardian's hull simply absorbed the energy and used it to power its own weapon systems. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. Patch fought like a living creature and a war machine at the same time. Parts of the Guardian's body would break away to attack individual Devourer ships while the main mass continued toward the system's core where the largest enemy vessels were feeding. Marcus experienced the battle through multiple perspectives simultaneously. He could feel every weapon impact on Patch's hull and every successful strike against enemy vessels. The consciousness of the absorbed crew members provided processing power that let the Guardian coordinate attacks across vast distances with perfect timing, but the Devourers adapted quickly as they always had. After losing the first wave of ships, they began to modify their tactics and weapons to counter Patch's defenses. New forms of enemy vessels emerged from the consumed matter of destroyed worlds, using designs that had never been seen before. The turning point came when Patch reached the heart of the enemy fleet near the dying star. The largest Devourer construct was there, feeding directly on stellar matter and growing to planetary size. This was the fleet's central intelligence, and destroying it would cut off coordination for all the smaller vessels. Marcus felt Patch's uncertainty as the Guardian realized that defeating this massive enemy would require using its ultimate capability. The creature could transform itself into a weapon of unimaginable power, but doing so would consume all the energy it had stored, including the life force of everyone it had absorbed. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus sensed the thoughts and feelings of every crew member who had joined with Patch. Commander Lyra's determination was strongest of all as she urged the Guardian to make the sacrifice. She had finally found something worth dying for that was greater than her own pride and perfection. But Marcus had a different idea born from his human understanding of cooperation and shared sacrifice. Instead of Patch consuming their life energy, the crew could freely give portions of their consciousness to amplify the Guardian's power while retaining enough to survive the battle. The process was unlike anything that had ever been attempted. Hundreds of minds merged temporarily into a single intelligence with the wisdom of an ancient Guardian and the collective knowledge of multiple species. For a brief moment, they became something greater than the sum of their individual parts. The weapon they created together was not based on destruction but on restoration. Instead of trying to destroy the massive Devourer construct, Patch used the combined will of the crew to reverse the consumption process. Matter that had been absorbed and corrupted for thousands of years began to return to its original form. The effect spread through the enemy fleet like a chain reaction. Ships that had been grown from consumed worlds began to dissolve back into the planets and people they had once been. The Devourer collective intelligence found itself fighting a battle it could not win because victory meant the destruction of everything it had built. Within hours, the entire fleet had been restored to its original components, planets reformed in their proper orbits around the healing star. Billions of people who had been consumed by the Devourers returned to life with no memory of their ordeal. The infection that had threatened to consume the galaxy was not just stopped but completely reversed. As the battle ended, Patch began the delicate process of separating the absorbed crew members back into their individual forms. Marcus was the first to emerge from the living ship and found himself standing in a restored cargo bay surrounded by friends who had become closer than family through their shared experience. Commander Lyra was among the last to separate from Patch, and when she emerged, she looked fundamentally changed. The arrogance and pride that had defined her people was gone, replaced by a deep understanding of what could be achieved when different beings worked together toward a common goal. The Guardian returned to its original form but retained the modifications that had made the victory possible. Patch was no longer the ugly mongrel that everyone had ignored. The creature's appearance now showed the true beauty of its purpose as protector and healer of life throughout the galaxy. News of what had happened spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. The story of the ugly alien dog that had saved civilization became legend within days. Research teams began searching ancient ruins looking for other dormant Guardians, hoping to awaken protectors who might judge their species worthy of salvation. Marcus found himself appointed as the official liaison between Patch and the Galactic Council. Together they established new protocols for first contact with unknown species based on compassion and respect rather than technological superiority or physical appearance. The Valtharian Empire underwent massive changes as Commander Lyra returned home and shared her experiences with the ruling council. The species that had prided itself on perfection began to value diversity and cooperation instead. They became some of the strongest advocates for protecting and nurturing life in all its forms. Years later, Marcus would often return to the cargo bay, where he had first found Patch eating scraps from the floor. The Guardian still maintained that space as a reminder of how the greatest power in the galaxy had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to show simple kindness to a creature everyone else had dismissed as worthless. The galaxy had learned that true strength came not from perfection or advanced technology, but from the wisdom to value and protect all forms of life regardless of their appearance or origin. And in the deepest reaches of space, other ancient guardians stirred in their long sleep, sensing that perhaps the younger races had finally grown wise enough to deserve their protection.